Not all channeling is done in the same way. The types of channeling can be classified in terms of how little or how much self-awareness the channel possesses while channeling. There's also a distinction to be made between mental and physical channeling. Mental channeling involves information such as thoughts, words, images, and feelings. Physical channeling is different, however. In this type of channeling, the channel affects the physical environment in some way. This might include healing of the physical body, materialization of or the movement of an object. Of course, this last type of channeling is much more rare than mental channeling. Some channels are able to control the experience of channeling at will and desire to participate. On the other hand, spontaneous channeling is when the individual is not able to control the experience. This is an intrusive type of channeling because it violates the free will of the channeler. Or it may be that the person doing the channeling gives permission but has no control over when and where the channeling experience takes place. Many channels were interviewed for a study on channeling, and some of them said that at first they experienced the phenomenon spontaneously, but later on learned to become intentional channels. Another distinction can be made between what is called classic channeling or entity channeling and open channeling. Classic channeling takes place when the channeler can identify his or her source of information. Some channels channel specific entities, such as Lee Carroll, for example, who always channels an entity that calls itself Kryon. I had a chance to see Lee Carroll in person back in 2014 when I attended a Kryon workshop. It was a very interesting experience. I spoke with Lee briefly after the channeling took place, and I was struck by how his entire voice and demeanor as Lee was very different from when Kryon was speaking through him. I asked Lee a question about something Kryon said during the channeling, and he seemed genuinely unaware of the topic and unable to answer. Lee is an example of a channel who started out as a spontaneous channel. As an engineer and a very left-brain individual who didn't believe in that kind of thing, he was shocked when Kryon initiated contact with him. That experience led to many more messages being received from Kryon, and Lee traveling the world channeling Kryon. In addition, Lee has written several books about what he has learned from Kryon. One of the most interesting books is about what he calls the Indigo Children, or the New Children. While Lee Carroll's channeling is an example of classic or entity channeling, another kind of channeling is called open channeling. In this type of channeling, information is received from other than identifiable sources. This type of channeling is different from the traditional kind of channeling described in the Kryon example because it includes instances such as a writer receiving the idea for a new book through a lucid experience or inspiration, or intuition and how it inspires an artist or a musician to produce creative content. Psychologist John Curtis Gowan wrote a book called Trance, Art, and Creativity, and suggested that there are 3 different types and categories of channeling experience. He calls these prototaxic, parataxic, and syntaxic. Prototaxic experience involves loss of ego control and awareness during trance, usually with no memory afterward. Parataxic experience includes images with self-awareness, but the meaning is not always clear or easily controlled by the ego or capable of being shared with others. Syntaxic experience involves conscious awareness channeling. It is ego-controlled and understood by symbolic means that do permit its communication to others, thus opening such private experience to consensus. Classification of these is made according to how little or how much self-awareness the channel possesses during the channeling experience. The prototaxic include full or unconscious trance, sleep, dream, and most historical physical channeling. Parataxic includes semi-conscious trance, mildly altered state channeling, clairaudient and clairvoyant channeling, and some of the more altered state activity of opening channeling among artists, musicians, writers, and public speakers. Automatic writing, the use of the Ouija board, and most fully conscious and opening channeling fall under the syntaxic type of channeling. However, depending on how much control the channel has over his or her behavior during the channeling, automatic writing in the Ouija board could also fall under the categorization of the prototaxic type of channeling. This is because in these kinds of cases, conscious control of movements of the body is absent, even though the mind remains in a state of normal self-awareness. Since I do automatic writing, I can affirm this last statement. Here's a typical example of how I do this kind of channeling. To put myself in a trance state, first thing I do is put on some Tibetan gong music. This immediately alters my level of consciousness because I can feel the gong resonating very deeply within me. Then I focus my attention on my third eye in order to open it. I always call upon the energy of the violet flame to surround me in order to protect me from any attempt by dark forces to penetrate my auric field. I ask the 4 archangels to surround me on all 4 corners, Michael on the right, Gabriel on the left, Uriel in front of me, and Raphael behind me. Then, if I'm channeling my higher self, I just pick up a pen and start writing. The words come in telepathically, and I write them down on the paper as they come in. If I'm doing a reading for someone who has passed over, I focus on a photo of that person if I have one, and if I don't, I just concentrate on the name and ask to contact that person's higher self. Usually I have the person who wants the reading done write at least 3 questions they would like answered. If they don't provide any questions, I just write whatever I receive telepathically. I do not do readings that project into the future. The future is always open to change because we have free will. I never do readings when they are not solicited. If I meet someone and I can see what they have attached to them, which happens all of the time, I stay silent. It is a violation of the universal law of free will to intrude upon a person in that way. Unfortunately, I sometimes have precognitive dreams of things that are going to happen, and frequently the events come to pass. Especially, I seem to be able to dream when someone I'm close to is pregnant before they know they are. 26 years ago, I dreamed my own mother's death, and I did not even know she was ill. I remember calling up my father the next day in a panic and asking him, "Is Mom sick? Is she dying?" And of course he lied and said no. Several days later, I was called to the hospital and was shocked to find out my mother was on the oncology ward. She died 6 weeks later, just as had happened in my dream. So when I have these precognitions from time to time, I usually don't say anything to anyone, because after all, we must be aware that sometimes people in our dreams symbolize something else or someone else that our subconscious mind is trying to make sense of. My mission is to provide hope and healing for those who are seeking. This is why I believe I have incarnated here at this time as a wanderer soul, to do what I can to dispel the darkness and to bring in light whenever and wherever I can. It is very rewarding work.